Fear's been one of the biggest, strongest, and most overpowering forces that I have ever experienced in my life. And I've lived with it my entire life. I've been afraid. And you would never know this by looking from the outside in. I was the type of person, I was rebellious. I went against the grain and, really pushed back against the system and people and life and ultimately myself. But my life has been governed by fear. And I think many people's lives have been governed by fear. I think we're taught a philosophy of fear from a very, very young age. I mean, from an infant stage and up into the toddler years. Don't do this. Oh, don't do that. It might hurt you. Or, they may get mad and punish you. And we're taught to be afraid. Our whole lives we're taught to be afraid. We're taught to run away from things, to avoid the pain of life, to try to mitigate the suffering by running from it. But the problem is, and I think the biggest problem is, it doesn't work. No matter how much you run from fear, it doesn't go away. And you can distract yourself from it, but at some point in time, you're going to be staring at it right in the eyes. And if we don't learn to do something about it, if we don't learn to become more effective in our approach, more strategic in what we do with it, well, we're going to run from fear for the rest of our lives. And I think most people do. And that's sad because fear then becomes a force that governs what we do and what we don't do. And it becomes this force that controls us. And I think that's ultimately what it's used for. And maybe we use it ourselves on other people or on ourselves. But it doesn't have to be that way. Being governed by fear my whole life and overcompensating and, the sickness that comes from that, the debilitation, the anger, the rage, the dysfunction. I've hurt myself and others so much in life because of fear. And there's only one thing that's ever really worked: facing it. And I think typically when we think of fears, we think of something like a spider or a snake or some type of a phobia or something that we're afraid of. But no, I don't think that that's really what fear is. I think that's an expression of fear. But I think fear is much deeper. I think fear is based on a fundamental belief systems. The idea that somehow we're inadequate, unable to handle the things that come in life. And so based on this fear, this idea, we run from the things, the natural happenings of life. Fear is a part of life, and it's not something to run from. Sure, it's scary. I get it. I understand. But running from it doesn't work. It's interesting to me working with so many people over more than 12 years now. It's recurring. It's the same thing. I see it over and over and over. The very thing that people are afraid of is the very thing they end up creating in their life. For example, relationships. And say you have one person and they constantly feel like they have to walk on eggshells so that they don't disrupt or, upset the other person, because if they do, that person might lash out. They may yell at them, fuss at them, or cuss at them, or maybe even abuse them. And so they're quiet. They suppress themselves, what we call experiential avoidance. They shut down their own humanity. They shut down their own emotions. They hide them for fear of upsetting the other person. And we wouldn't want to, cause chaos. We got to maintain the peace. And the problem with that, the biggest problem, is that it comes at the expense of their own peace. And more than that, it doesn't work. Because they still get abused. They still get yelled at. They still get mistreated. They still get treated the way that they're trying to avoid being treated. They still get treated that way. if we can look at this from a strategic standpoint and just understand that it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I know it's what we know to do. It's what we've been taught to do. It's what everybody does. But the fact is it doesn't work. And so regardless of whether everybody does it or whether it's common or normal, it doesn't matter. If it doesn't work, then why are we doing it? Why are we not sitting down thinking about this and saying, hey, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way that works. And there is a way that works. You know, I think it starts in the fundamentals of the belief systems, the philosophies that we have in life. And as I've thought about this over the years, because I've lived in such deep fear, debilitating fear, dysfunctional fear, and I've thought about this, and I've spent so much of my time and my life's work trying to figure out better ways of doing this, coping, handling this, interacting with this. Well, I've only found a few things that work, and the most basic, the most effective, fundamentally, is to change the principles, the belief systems, the ideas or philosophies that we live on. We have to think of ourselves differently. We have to believe ourselves differently. We have to change who we are. Fundamentally, we have to do this at the very core, the very essence of our identity. We have to change that if we want to change our experience. And let me tell you, it works. It's the only thing that works. You know, again, we're not talking about, spiders and snakes. Those are just simple expressions of fear. We're talking about the quality of life. We're talking about overcoming some of the most debilitating dysfunctions, anxiety, depression, guilt, shames, angers, resentments, overwhelm, many levels of stress. It all starts at the fundamental level, the belief systems. And so as I've delved into this, as I've really worked to recreate, restructure what my experience is in life, I've created 4 principles, what I call principles of empowerment. And this is based on looking at and dissecting those principles of that fear-based philosophy, looking at them and working to change them into empowering belief systems. And I think the belief systems at the core, that's what drives us. That's what dictates what is and what isn't, what will and will not be. That's what dictates the quality of life that we have ultimately. And so working to recreate those into ones that empower me. And look, when you're talking about belief systems and philosophies in this way, it doesn't really matter if they're necessarily in line with the ultimate truth in life. And I believe the ultimate truth in life is nothing more than empowerment. And when we wear those philosophies of truth and empowerment, life takes on a very different meaning. A very different meaning. And so the 4 philosophies of empowerment that I've created, that I've learned to live my life on, they've freed me from those clutches of living in fear. That doesn't mean that I don't experience it. What it means, though, is I don't live based on that experience of it. I'm no longer defined by it. I'm no longer afraid to step into something. I'm no longer afraid to believe in myself. I'm no longer afraid of the repercussions of that. And there are many repercussions to living an empowered life. One of those of which is rejection. And I think rejection is probably one of the biggest fears that people have. People not accepting them for who they are, so they conform. And the problem with that is even that is a fear-based philosophy, because when you think about it, if you conform to everyone else at the expense of your authenticity, well, that is the ultimate rejection, because it is the rejection of the self. And I think that we can do better. I think that we can live better. I think we can do much better. And I'm living proof that we can do much better. And really all it takes is a choice to make several choices, but nevertheless a choice. And that's something that we all have the power to do. And so my 4 philosophies of empowerment that have really changed the dynamics of life for me begins with the first, which is life is reflective. Life is going to reveal to you ultimately yourself. And we look out into this world and we think we see what's there, but what we're actually seeing is what's inside of ourselves. We each experience life differently. We each live in our own curated reality. And fundamentally, the difference is our belief systems, how we view the world and ourselves in relation to the world. And I think that when you change that and you start realizing that what you see and experience outside of you reflects the internal aspects of yourself, it's not something to then be avoided or to change your externals. Now, sure, we want the externals to change, but working with the externals to change them is kind of like working with the results alone to change the results. Whereas if we can use what we see and what we experience outside of us in a state of reflection, we can then contemplate the self. And we can then step into tweaking or changing or, changing the dynamics of the cause. And so when we can see life as a reflection of ourselves, then we can start working with what I believe creates our lives or our experience of life, and that's the self. And so if we can look at life as a reflection of the self, we can begin to work on the causes of what's creating our outcomes. Because what you have in life, ultimately, the things that recur in life, I'm not talking about the things that happen spontaneously. I'm talking about the things that recur. Those are held there by us. That's why they recur. And that's why they're individual and unique to ourselves, is because they're created by ourselves. And so working with our belief systems and starting to use those things outside of us to understand the self better allows us the ability, the power, if you will, to change our choices that will lead us into different experiences. So life is reflective is the very first principle of philosophy of empowerment that I have accepted and utilize in my daily life. The second philosophy of empowerment is that we are creators. That we are the ones who get to decide what is and is not going to be ultimately in our life. Now, this doesn't mean that we get to choose everything we go through, but starting to understand life in a very different way and realizing that life is, again, reflective and responding to us, we start to realize that the choices that we make ultimately are going to decide what we have on a regular basis in our life. And as a creator, you have to believe in choice. And so if you look at your experiences in life and you look at where you are, your situations, the recurring things of where you are currently in your life, you're going to be able to, if you can, muster up enough energy to do some introspection, to really, really think in an objective way about your life and where you are and what got you here, you're going to find ultimately that it's a response of your choices, that your choices have led you where you are. And when you start to realize that, when you start to really own that, then you start to take responsibility. And responsibility is the ability to respond, which means that you start to reflect and you start to notice that these little choices that you make on a daily basis, and it's not always the big choices that you make in life. It's more so the small choices, the little things, the small steps. That's what create the big results. It's a compilation of all these small steps that we take. And so when we start to realize where we are, it's a reflection of the choices and the directions that we've chosen to take in our lives, then it throws you can look at it as a heavy burden of responsibility, but you can also look at it as, a freedom. Our greatest gift is our ability to make choices in our life. And of course, we don't get to, choose everything that comes into our life. But even when you're interacting with something you don't prefer, when you take responsibility and recognize your power of choice, then you can do what you prefer with that thing that you don't prefer to experience. You can use your choice to decide how you're going to use and interact with anything and everything in your life. And ultimately, the meanings in life are individual. They're things that we choose. Now, maybe we were taught this way, maybe this is what you've experienced in the past, but if it's going to stay that way, then it's by choice. And so recognizing that you're a creator is a very powerful step, because if you are a creator and if you can create the responses that you experience in life, then you can start making choices that move you in the directions that you want to be. And if you do this enough, ultimately you will experience what it is that you want to experience. The third philosophy of empowerment that I've, really fundamentally installed into myself and my life, my mind, my belief system, is that life is here to help you. I truly believe that everything in life is a gift. Now, can you imagine living your life that way? Imagine living your life from the perspective that every single thing that you experience, every single thing that you go through, every single thing that you interact with is here to help you. When you think from a perspective like that, what you do is you move from that perspective, which means when you believe everything in life is a gift, you begin to interact with everything in life as if it were a gift. And from that perspective, you begin to create or experience the gifts in every single thing. And we've heard this many times and in many different ways as well. Things like the silver lining in a situation, the things that you're going through, right? So when you can see everything in life as a gift, then you can find a gift in every single thing in life. And let me tell you, that philosophy alone will change the whole game for you, and has for me. It will send you into a completely different reality in life. Everything in life is a gift, and it's here to help you. Ultimately, it's here to help you to achieve the purposes, the things that you most desire. And so stepping into that philosophy really is and has been so very life-changing for me. And the fourth philosophy of empowerment is that life is about change. Now, as simple as this, sounds, we tend to get attached to things. We tend to get overly attached to things, and, our attachments ultimately are going to create the suffering that we experience. Letting go, the process of grief is nothing more than letting go of an attachment, an idea. But life is about change. From one moment to the next, life is always changing. It's always here evolving. It wants to experience and express more. You're not meant to stay where you are. Yes, you may like where you are. You may not like where you are, but you're not meant to stay there either way. And so when you embrace the fact, the reality that life is about change, then you can embrace the new things, the new opportunities, the new possibilities, good, bad, right, wrong, indifferent, it doesn't matter. This is what life is about. And as much as we try to avoid that, it's just the way it is. You can stand still in life, and life is still going to change all around you. You can't avoid it. It's not something you could do anything about, and it's not something you want to do anything about. It may sound nice. It may sound, cool to be where you are if you're in a good state forever, but you're going to get bored. You're meant to change. That's why you have a constant influx of new ideas and new hopes and new dreams and new desires. You're meant to change because life is about change. Life is here to help you create that change. Because life is reflective, so that you can reflect and understand where you are, how you got here, so that you can then use your choice as a creator to take yourself into different places, new ideas, explore new possibilities, and life is going to help you along that journey because life is about change, and it's going to help you. It's going to take you on that ride. And so learning how to just embrace the reality of life is going to go so far in helping you recreate your experiences, change your life in the ways that you want. If you want to change your life, if you really want to make some significant, powerful changes, we have to start thinking differently. And so I offer to you these 4 philosophies of empowerment that have created such a profound impact in my life. I sure hope they help.